yeah, I mean, I probably had more dates and been seeing more girls than I have like in say 3 months, like comparable to like 3 or 4 years. Yeah, it's 100% been life changing. Like it genuinely has. It's like all those problems that I used to have for like years and years and years of just like having like emotional attachment and problems with girls. Like I'd see hot girls and fuck's sake, like, you know, it's almost like all those problems are just like, you know, maybe 10 years of problems have just disappeared. Like genuinely just disappeared.
Cool. All right. So I'm back today with a guest who's been on before, Danny from Sheffield. You probably know who I'm talking about. If you're not listening to that first interview, I'll link it at the end of this one. But yeah, I'm excited for this one because it's almost been 3 months since we actually worked together in Manchester, and you've been absolutely flying since we worked together. So I wanted to get you back on the podcast, really to check in with you and to give you an opportunity to tell the people what you've been up to and how life has actually been since we worked together 3 months on. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, it's been just a roller coaster. That's the thing. It's so, because like, don't get me wrong, it's been great because I think it's been such an emotional roller coaster, and obviously the highs have been fantastic. But the lows have been good as well because it almost like tests you as a person. So like, because I've had days where I was just like, oh wow, like I remember one day I was like, I felt like emotionally just like on the ropes, like boxing, and I was like, God, this is a real test today. But it kind of like, you know, it just like shows you like what you are as a person. Like if you're willing just to be like, oh, you know, I've had like 5 minutes of a bad day, I'm gonna call it a day. And so yeah, it's been amazing, really. Yeah, so since I boot camp, I made a promise for myself to, because obviously, you know, I live in a town, so it's quite different, and I work by myself, so it was quite difficult to do it like every day. I suppose that wasn't really my intention to begin with. Like I just said, minimally, I want to do at least 1 day a week. Like in the early days, I was going out a bit more, but minimally, I just wanted to do like 1 day a week. So maybe I go to like a bigger city on Saturday or Sunday. So that was my just like that was literally my minimal goal, where I'd go out for like 4 hours, probably do, I don't know, I'd just take any opportunity I can. I'd never do a set amount. Like I'd probably do between 10 to 12, maybe a bit more like solid, like fully committed approaches. So yeah, that's what I did. And obviously whatever on top of that was just like a bonus. Like quite a few weekends I would almost treat it like a mini boot camp again, where I'd go Saturday, Sunday, and just put in the effort, put in the time. But yeah, it's been crazy because like, I was trying to think about it like the other day, just like you kind of, I mean, I forgot about like every girl I've approached, like all those like, you know, those like passing blowouts and stuff. And I literally have, like, even like the weekend, I'm like, I can't remember the girls I approached in a way. But yeah, it's been really good. And I think like, I think for me, like I always said to you, like, I feel like I had it in my locker a little bit because I've been traveling, I've socialized like my whole life. But for me, it was just like unlocking it, where the initial, so for me, like, you know, a lot of people get into this and like they might almost, what's the word, where they break it down so much. But for me, it's like my whole goal is still like habitually just like doing the approach. Because I think like after that, I could wing it to a certain level. I don't get me wrong, like, obviously I remember like over time, I kind of, for me, what I do is like I kind of like treat it as like levels. So I was like getting to the point where I was like doing the approaches absolutely fine, and I was like, oh, you know, maybe I need to work on like my opener a little bit and like almost like calibrate it a little bit more. And then like over time, like, I realized like my close was a bit weak, where I'd be like, oh, you know, would you like to go for a drink, instead of being like, look, 7 o'clock Friday, let's go for a cocktail or something like that. And then even like when I messaged you about when I'm getting girls, because I was getting girls' numbers quite frequently, but then they weren't really going, like they were kind of going somewhere. But I realized, like, I think I watched one of their videos and I realized that I was one of those messages with a girl where it was almost like long paragraphs of like emoticons or whatever it's called. And I was like, oh no, that's me. And then from then, like, I think I was just like really direct. I voice note like majority of the time now, which is baffling. But like since voice noting, I think like the girls, the girls have
already, man.
Yeah, there's my voice note. Yeah, even like since voice note, I remember when I messaged you and being like, oh, like, dude, like, you know, maybe I should try that out. Like, I remember, like, I think the 2 girls I voice noted, like, one of the girls ended up going on dates with and stuff, and like it was also, the success rate was insanely high just from voice noting. So I was like, oh wow, that's such a weird, like, just like a little tweak where it makes it so personal. So yeah, it's like it's crazy. I think it's just crazy because I think it's like one of those things where, yeah, it's 100% been life changing, like it genuinely has. But it's almost like instead of, it's like all those problems that you used to have for like years and years and years of just like having like emotional attachment and problems with girls. Like I'd see hot girls and oh fuck's sake, like I'm sorry for swearing, brother.
So you want.
I'd be like, oh no, it's almost like all those problems are just like maybe 10 years of problems have just disappeared. Like genuinely just disappeared. So it's like my only problem now is like I remember like, cutting it off with girls. I've never really done that because I didn't have so many opportunities. And I'm like, oh wow, this is like, because I think as well, like this, the whole process, like for me, it was like, oh, just approaching girls. But now I'm realizing, I was like, oh my God, like, treating, like genuinely, like, I don't want to be an asshole where, like, obviously I know like the ghosting and all this, like, is very like in modern day dating culture. But, like one girl that I quit off with, and I felt really bad because I was like, oh, maybe I did get a bit emotionally close to her. And in my head, I didn't want that. So I was like, oh, I'm kind of learning about this as well because I've just never had to deal with that. So I'm like, oh shit, like I didn't learn this from Kristian. Yeah. So yeah, it's just been such a life lesson. And yeah, don't get me wrong, like I think I messaged you after that weekend that I had, I was just like, it literally was the best weekend. Like if I had to like break everything I've learned down to like the perfect weekend, like that would have been it. But I think for me, like I said to you, like I almost like felt like I deserved that weekend from like the days where I went out where, yeah, I did feel, don't get me wrong, I do think for me, like rejection and stuff, like it doesn't get to me to the point where I quit it off, where I'll have like 2 blowouts and like, oh, you know what, call it a day. Like I'll still go, I still will do it. So I'm quite happy with that kind of going through the resistance side. But there's some days where I remember one day where one girl kind of called up, like the first girl I went on a date with, she just like messaged me saying, like, and to be fair, it was a bit too far anyway, so I wasn't that bothered. Because for me, like the main thing why I go to big cities is just to practice, like not really. Like I'm staying a bit more local now because I'm like, oh, I do kind of want to date and stuff. But yeah, I remember like she kind of put it off, and I was like, okay, yeah, no worries. And then I remember we went out that day, and I was just like, I'm getting really like, I say rejection, but like the really nice rejections. Like they're not like, get away from me, slap around the face. Like they are just like, oh, like that's so nice that you came up to me. But I remember just like, oh wow, like this is a proper test today. But like you kind of go through all those like slightly painful periods to when you do get that day. It's like I deserve it. Like I deserve it. I put in this work now. So yeah, it's been crazy.
Yeah, and that's I remember when you first got in contact with me. This is exactly what we wanted to happen. Like because you knew you had a lot of value to give, and like you say, it was about unlocking the potential that you already had.
Yeah.
But I remember you were saying how you went out with like a friend of yours or something, the way that your friends are perceiving you differently now compared to how you used to be in the past. Like just tell us a little bit more about that.
Laughable. Like, so one of my closest mates, we used to be like best mates back in the day. We kind of like lost contact a little bit. And then I think, because I've started playing football again. I played like my whole life, and they've always been like, oh, can you play like Sunday league? And then I just said to like a guy, like, oh, I'll be honest with you, I've got a date. Like we're voice noting, and it was like, oh, nice, like, oh, when you meet her, like straight away, like, oh, on Tinder, Hinge, and I was like, oh no, like, I approached from the street, and it was like, you're just like, oh mate, that's so respectful. Like, no guys, I don't know any guy would do that. And then that's when I kind of opened up to him. I was like, oh, I'll be honest, mate, like I go out every weekend, like pretty much like, by myself, or I meet up with Mark or Baker. And he was like, oh, mate. And straight away, he was like, oh, really? He's a really good looking guy, and he's always had success with women, to be fair to him. But it's maybe by not the way that, you do it. It's more just like online and kind of like friends of friends on, like, yeah, I mean, the town that I'm in, like everyone kind of knows everyone. So he's, he had that kind of thing. But so, I took him out, and I was like, oh, look, I go out one day, like minimally go out one day a week. So more than welcome to tag along. And we just went around, and he genuinely were just like, it was one of those days where I don't get me wrong, like, I remember like a few more, I felt a bit nervous because I was like, oh wow, like, I'm almost like having to show him. But he was like genuinely like, it was like, mate, I've never seen you be like this in my life. Like you've never, and it blew his world a little bit. Because I remember him saying like the next day he turned up to football, like my mates are coming up to me and being like, oh yeah, like so and so is like said like, oh, like it was shaking your hand, like it was just like took your hat off to you. It was like it was the most best thing he's ever seen in his life, genuinely. But it was one of those days, to be honest, mate, went out all day. Football was on in Sheffield, so it was like a festival. It was just a brilliant day out. And then yeah, so that day we did like all approaches, and I was getting really like good results, like probably getting like out of like I was getting a number every 2 approaches pretty much. Like it was just really good and really good conversations. And then like the last one, we were so can you remember the road when you came to Sheffield where I think I did one approach in Sheffield and it was like she was crossing the street and I was a bit like, oh, there's nothing about. So that road,
Yeah.
we just got food walking down, and this absolutely just like genuinely like a worldie walk. Like I was walking towards us like in like leg it, and my friends got high standards, and he was like, she's got the best ass I've ever seen. And I was like, obviously I was like, oh, this is it. I was like, this is perfect. So I said to him, I was like, I think he kind of like debated it because obviously he was like, but I was like, you're not having this, mate. I was like, I put in the effort. I'm going for this. And it was just like this most solid approach I've ever done. Like it was like 15-minute chat, like back and forth, like so playful. That like 10 minutes later after I left her, she messaged me. This never happens. I was just like, so I voice noted straight away. And like literally the next day, played football, and she'd message me like bombarded with messages being like, oh, what are you doing today? Like I'm free all day. And I was like, so I said to my mate, like, look, I'm taking her out, like, you know, is it strike it whilst the iron's hot or something, that phrase?
Yep.
And yeah, ended up like having a full day with her, like going back to hers, you know, all the exciting things happened. And I was like, it was like a 24-hour turnaround. And I was like, for my friend to see that, and it was like, oh my God, like the possibilities of this. But it was like, I'll be honest, like it almost, you know, as much as like, I don't want to just value women based off looks and stuff, but she was just like almost like by far the best girl I've probably been with physically. But it was nice to see, and you know, and it's nice to have that experience and then just like carrying on. And then, so yeah, it was that weekend was insane. Because I think that Friday, the night before as well, I'd gone on a date with, stayed at hers from like an approach I did the week before. So it was just a weekend like jam packed where I'm like, I can't believe I've got these possibilities of like dating girls and like, you know, sleeping with girls and just having it. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah, and that is the abundance right there. You know, that's the abundance that people can search their whole lives looking for this. And I've said it to you before, I've said it to guys before, but abundance isn't always having, it's knowing you can have. And now you'll never be needy in your life again because you know at any given time, all you need to do is go outside and speak to people because you've got that skill set nailed down. You're only going to get better. Life is only going to improve. And now you're never going to be needy in your life again. And I think compared to where you are now, compared to where you've been in your life, you're in a completely transformed position. And it's only been 3 months.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, cause I'll be honest, like with this girl, like I genuinely, because I think the first date I was like almost giddy about it, and not because like she's really like beautiful girl. It was just like she was kind of ticking a lot of boxes, and I was a bit like in my head like oh no, like I don't really want to meet anyone yet. But in my head, I did say like regardless if me and her progress, that I would still do this one day a week, go to a city where it's outside the city where I met her, where I wouldn't have to follow up or anything, but it's just practicing. But after that, the honeymoon period, like when, like within like 2 days, and we met up again and realized like we don't actually click at all. And I was a little bit good, and I was a bit like, oh God, like this is the first time where I really, 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 really fancied the girl. But then I just went out the weekend again, and me, my mate, and Mark, we actually met up on Friday in Birmingham, and it was a bit of a dry day really. But funnily enough, I went to it was my first time I've ever done it in a store. So I went to Primark because it was freezing, so I was like, I'm just gonna get a sweatshirt, way out here. Went up the escalators, this like beautiful girl like smiled at me, and I was like perfect. So I was just like, I went over and did it, and she was like looking at clothes, and I was like, oh, you know, excuse me, got chatting to her for like 15 minutes. She was a really beautiful girl. But I don't know if I'm gonna follow up with it because I'm like, it's just a bit too far for me. I'm like, you know what, I enjoy doing what I'm doing, but like I'm not desperate need for dates at the moment. But yeah, she's like, we voice noted, and she's like, oh, you know, you can come up here and stuff. So, and she was a beautiful girl, and but like straight away, like you just jump back out and you're like, oh yeah, there's loads of beautiful girls that I can click with, and so yeah, it's just it's an unbelievable skill to have. But yeah, and to be fair, this weekend I've had some really nice experience. I'll explain as well, actually, that kind of fall under a different umbrella of just like being with an attractive girl. but yeah, like this. I mean, this weekend, I feel I am aware that I'm just bombarding you with all this information. So I didn't know if you wanted to ask anything else.
No, it's exactly what I wanted, man. I just wanted you to talk. I wanted you to tell the people what's actually happened to your life 3 months on. I think I wanted to do this first and foremost because it's very easy for boot camps to be like an MDMA experience where you have the massive high and then nothing actually happens, and guys are always commenting, being like, "Yeah, but what actually happened with this guy?" Or like, what were his results? Like, day game doesn't actually work. So I wanted to have this 3 month period where you could go experience life, do what you do, and then come back and be like, "This is what I was able to experience after doing the boot camp."
Yeah. I think that's the thing, like. Because I think that's why, for me, I made it a promise to myself, regardless of how I feel. And I feel like anyone who's listened to this, who's probably had the bootcamp experience or is getting into this, like, yeah, don't get me wrong, like, life's so good. Like, life's easy. Like, you know, you've had those like few days where I've had a few like where I've jumped into straight away and I'm like, socially, I'm like, I walk away and I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm an expert. Like, I should start a YouTube channel. Like, I feel unbelievable. And like, you almost like skip it. But yeah, and don't get me wrong, those days, like, you deserve that and they're amazing to experience. But to earn those days, you need to go through those days where you don't feel great. You might feel a little bit like, you know, I've been in conversations where I'm like, what am I saying? Like, I remember saying to one girl, like, I was half Sicilian. I was like, I'm not. And I remember walking away and being like, I just lied to this girl. But it was just like, I just felt so clunky. But I'm like, I need to go through this phase. So that's why, for me, like, it's so important where, because I think it's very easy to be like, and don't get me wrong, like, I don't do this every day, so maybe it's different. Like, I'll be honest, I do mainly do it the weekend, but, you know, again, I'll go into other ones before, like, where if I go about me every day where I'm getting my hair cut, like, I have kind of like just habitually jumped into a few where I'm like, oh my God, like, this is actually a habit now. It's crazy. But yeah, that's why I always say, you know, if you get into this, like, just make sure like you have your minimal goal of like, well, I think 1 day a week, like, anyone can spare 1 day a week doing this and just go out regardless. Like for me, I'll be honest, whenever I go out, like, a lot of times I'm just like, do I really want to do this? Like, you know, do I have to, like, oh God, like, you know, another 3-4 hours getting a train or this lot? And then I'm like, you know, if you feel like that, just put yourself in the situation regardless. Even if you go to the city you want to go to, walk around, come back, just put yourself, as soon as you put yourself, it's like going, like, you can't bother to go to the gym. If you go to the gym, you're going to work out. Like, you know, a lot of times, like, I'm like, I can't bother to go to the gym. But if I drive to the gym, I'm like, well, I'm here now. And it's the same with this, like there's a few times where I've been like, I'm not really bothered, but then I'll go to the city and I'll see a beautiful girl. I'm like, oh, yeah, perfect, let's go. So yeah, like, that's what I mean. So I think it's very, very, very important, because I don't think you might disagree with me, I don't know, but I don't think, for me, like, I'll never feel like wake up and like, oh my God, day game today. Like, I'll never do that. I'm just like, oh yeah, like, cool, like, I've got this plan, like, I'm going to it. And it's almost like having that a bit of like a stoic mindset towards it, where just like, regardless of how you feel, detach emotions from it, just go out and do it like you want, you know. And I think as well, it's almost good to kind of allow yourself not to do it, because I think there's a lot of pressure with people where they go out and they think, oh my God, like, I've not done it. It's like, just speak to yourself and be like, look, you don't have to do it. Like, sometimes I've done it before, even like on the boot camp. I remember being like, Danny, you don't have to do this. Like, you can go back to being like that miserable guy sat on his settee, angry at the world, where it's like, where are my options? Like, I'm saying, like, you can go back to that. That's absolutely fine. But then you just have to remind yourself, like, why you're doing this. And like, I know my reasons. And yeah, it's just like, you just give into the world. Like, you know, I've had something like this weekend, like, one girl, bless her, straight away, she was like, oh my God, you've made my day. And like, to do that, like, I didn't get anything from that. Like, I've had, and as well, like, I'm sure you've had that like, I've had that a lot of times where I remember one girl, bless her, within 4 seconds, like, I said it to her, she looked at me and just like gave me the biggest hug ever. And I was like, and she was like, I have a boyfriend, but that is the nicest thing. And I was just like, that's what I mean. Like, this is, you're giving out to the world, like, you're not taking anything. It's so yeah, it's just like, it's one of those things, like, with this, like, I can't, like, if I have to, because some of my friends, like, who, like, so one of my best mates who we've been going out together, he was sold on it instantaneously, you know, because I think as well, he's been in a single life where he's like, yeah, online dating, like, it sucks. Like, I think I've done it for like 2 weeks over the last 10 years, and I think it's the worst thing ever. Like, I just don't like it. But then I got some friends who are like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'm like, it's very self-explanatory. Like, I'm like, there's literally, I can't think of one negative to this. I genuinely can't think. Like, I said to my friend, I was like, okay, if I had to think of the negative, I would say that in the early days, it's a bit time consuming. Like, and then my friend was like, oh, you're obviously clutching at straws there. And I'm like, yeah, I am, because I'm like, I'm going up to attractive girls I like, giving them myself the opportunity to meet them to meet me. See if we get on. If we don't, we don't. Like, it's a win-win. Like, you know, and don't get me wrong, like, I reckon I've done like a fair amount of approaches now. And I've definitely had like, I had one this weekend where she was just like, she was Russian and she always like brutalized me. And I walked away and I was like, ooh, that one stung a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, you do get that. But like a lot of those times, like the rejections are like, oh my God, like you've made my day. I do have a partner. I'm like, that's, you know, you read rejection on the paper online, you think it's like a big stamp on your forehead, like being rejected. I'm like, no, it's like girls will be like, you've made my day, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, cool. And like, you know, rejections are so, I love a good rejection. Like, I like it. I think it's fun. Like, so that's what I mean. Like, I think people get into it. It's like read online being like, oh, I went out today, did 100 approaches, got 99 rejections, you know, and I'm like, you know, it's stop reading that stuff online. Like, it's just, you don't know what the person's like, and you don't realize like rejection is actually, it's such a good thing. It's good for you, you know, it's good for that. Like, it's such a good experience to go through. Like, I've been rejected so many times, and people hearing that like, oh my God, this guy sucks or whatever. But it's like, no, it's such, I put myself out there so many times that I'm going to get rejected, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah. I think that's quality advice. I think when you do make peace with the, let's call it, worst case scenario, then you really don't have anything to fear anymore, because that's realistically the only reason that no one does this, or a very limited amount of people do it, is because they're just scared of that worst case scenario. But after you've lived through it, you realize, oh wow, it's actually not that bad, and in fact you can actually take quite a lot of joy out of it. But the thing that you mentioned as well about, I don't believe that anyone ever 100% wants to do it. And I think that's quite a comforting thing to realize, that no matter who you are, no one really wants to do it, because like biologically, you're going against everything you've been programmed. Because like back in the day, if you got rejected, meant your DNA wasn't worthy of replication. So I don't think anyone ever 100% wants to do it. And I think that should reassure guys. It's fine to go out there and not want to do it, but you have to remind yourself that the way you start isn't the way you finish, and you'll be in a completely different world an hour afterwards if you've had conversations. But the final thing that I wanted to ask you, really, you've kind of answered it, but I just want to ask you anyway, like, how has your actual dating life changed now compared to before?
Just like, I mean, don't get me wrong, like in the early days, like I was going, because I'll be honest, like, I'm not that bothered about dating at the moment. Like, I still, like, I am a little bit now, but like in the very, very early days, like, I was going to big cities. So I was going to Manchester, where I don't mind like pursuing, but I remember I went on one day in Manchester, and the train stopped running at the weekend. And I was like, oh no. And then I had to drive there, pay for parking, rang up my sister, and I was like, look, Leanne, can I stay in your flat? I'm going on a date. And she was like, yeah, you can, but obviously we've got work tomorrow. It was like a Sunday. And it was a ball ache, like it was a massive ball ache. And don't get me wrong, like the girl was lovely, and I really found it, like, this was my first ever date, I think, from like doing this approaching thing. So I kind of wanted to like experience like the whole kind of like, you know, every single part of like cold approach, whatever, you know, people call it. So for me, like the early days, like I wasn't that bothered, like, because I was like, no, I just want to learn this skill. Like, you know, I'd get girls' numbers. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna like still pursue them, because I want to learn this side of it. Like, I didn't realize like my texting game or whatever was like quite poor. So I think like now, like I do go to cities like a bit. So I'll go to Nottingham, like with Mark, like sometimes, like we've been linking up most weekends, because it's like 30 minutes away, where I'm like, oh, I can easily pursue a date with this. And I will say I do go to Sheffield every now and again, because it's perfect. It's like literally 15-20 minute drive for me. So like now I am at the point where I'm like, actually I can kind of like, you know, I feel like I'm good enough, strong enough to get like, you know, maybe do like 10 approaches and get like a good handful of numbers, and one of them will probably go on a date with me, and when it's local. So yeah, in terms of dating life, like, yeah, I think like even from when, so I was seeing a girl, so I think so the first girl I was seeing from doing this, like, it wasn't really, funny enough, it wasn't called approach, but it was definitely like a byproduct of doing this. Like, I was on the train, there was 3 girls, and like one of them accidentally like hit my head. Like, she stood near me, and then like straight away, like, sparked a conversation, like making them like all laugh, like sitting there in conversation for like half an hour. But that would never have happened if I wouldn't have done this. So I'd have been like, oh, it's okay, like, don't worry about it. Instead of like, damn me, like, it's fine. And then me and her, like, we're seeing each other a bit, and like, you know, lovely girl and stuff. But for me, I didn't want to settle down. And then from there, it was from when I messaged you actually asking about the voice noting thing. Like, yeah, I've just gone on dates straight away. Like, the voice noting thing is a bit of a game changer, like genuinely a bit of a game changer, I think. Like, I don't do it because I think as well, like, I think with some girls that when I'm in conversation, I'm like, yeah, they're interested. Like, obviously, it's a complete assumption, but some, like, I remember that the worldie, she was so invested in me. It was insane. Where, like, I feel like I feel like it depends on the conversation I have with a girl, then I do voice note. If it's like I remember that one Brazilian girl, really pretty and stuff, but you could tell she was almost like, you know, that body posture of like itching to get away. And so you try and like, you know, I know you're itching to get away, but like just like blah, 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 whatever. But yeah, my dating life, yeah, it's just like, I mean, it's getting to the point where I'm just like, yeah, I can't, like, this one absolutely beautiful girl, I'm like, I can't really bother to see her because I'm like, I know, do you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, my dating life, it's expensive. This is the expensive side of doing this, because like, I am someone who's like, I do like to pay for drinks and stuff, and like, I'll pay for meals, whatever. But yeah, my dating life, like, yeah, I thought about it the other day, like, you know, prior to doing this whole experience, like last year, I mean, I can't remember, apart from like the odd girl I've been seeing, like, I can't remember last time I had sober sex. Like, it's always been like drunkenly awful one night stands where I hate him, but it's like a slight like hit from our ego. And yeah, like now it's like it's just, yeah, I mean, I probably have more dates and been seeing more girls than I have like in say 3 months, like comparable to like 3 or 4 years. Like, genuinely, like, I just, because I never online dated as well. I never knew deep down, I knew what I wanted, and I knew that would never fulfill it. So I was like, yeah, I could get maybe like a, you know, a date off Tinder or whatever, but I knew I didn't want that. So I never pursued dating really anyway. But like now, like, yeah, like my dating life's just, it's only going to get better, because I do think, like, you know, if I really, really want to push it, like, I could go out like every day, and I know for a fact I'll get, because I think I'm at the point now where like I'm comfortable in interactions, like I get good interactions with girls and stuff. But I'm kind of like happy with what I'm doing now. But I did have like one experience this weekend actually I want to share, just because I think as well it did fall under the umbrella of like not just like sleeping with, like, seeing a hot girl. But funnily enough, so yeah, I went out this weekend. I was meant to meet Mark, and then there was like the roadworks were ridiculous, like near me, like they closed off the whole bypass. So I was like, you know, I'm just gonna go to Sheffield. And I remember like going around, and I was getting really good interactions, like really, really good. And then in my head, I'm like, oh, this is a banker. And then I had a few oh, look, I don't give my number out to strangers and all this. Like, that was the first time I had that. And I was like, oh, you know what? That's absolutely fine. And she was like, you can have my Instagram. And I was like, look, I don't use it. So I didn't really push for it. And I was going around, I was a bit like waiting for a friend, and just like, okay, like I've done like 6 or 7 or whatever, and a bit of like, nothing's gone there. I'm like, yeah, whatever, it's just part of it. And I was sat in my car, and weirdly enough, like a girl walked past my car, and I was like, oh, she was really cute. So I was like, oh, you know, like, screw it, let's go and do it. And I went up to her, I did it, and straight away she was so confused. And then so I was just like, oh, look, do you speak English? She's like, oh, you know, I'm Ukrainian. So I was like, oh, nice. So I explained, I was like, I saw you walking, blah, 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 all this kind of like rubbish. And straight away she was, because I said like the Tramlines festival was on, I was like, oh, you know, like you I presume you haven't been to Tramlines, like you look like going to the gym or whatever. And she's like, oh, do you want to go? Like, her English is quite poor. She's like, oh, do you want to go tomorrow? So I was like, oh yeah, of course, like that sounds really nice. And I said to her, mate, I was a bit giddy because I was like, oh, you know, she was quite my type, like, you know, kind of like pale, petite, like really like art is. And I messaged her that evening, and she never replied. And I said to her, mate, I was like, oh, I'm a little bit gutted about that, I'm not gonna lie. But then she actually messaged me back the next day, like really broken English, like, glad to meet you, and like, do you want to meet it, blah blah blah. And so I went for a walk with it on Sunday night, and it was just like a really unbelievable experience. Not because of like, yeah, she's cute, and maybe I don't know, like, she's cute, but like what she's been got, like the fact, so she's a refugee, been in the city for 2 months, literally apart from the girl she lives with, who apparently isn't very social, she doesn't know anyone. So it's like, I was almost like, you know, she was telling about like, obviously what's happened in the war and stuff. And like when she came over, she said she was trying to make friends. It was so difficult. And it was just such like, I walked away and I was like, I'm so glad I gave her that opportunity to meet someone. And like, for me, like, I'll be honest, like, I probably won't pursue it romantically because I'm like, actually, I like her. She's a lovely, like, she's the most mature girl I've ever met to say what she's going through. And I'm like, I'm so glad that I can be there for her as a friend. And like, you know, if she wants to practice her English, like, I don't really care about the romantic. Like, for me, that's almost like one of the biggest wins I had from this, rather than being like, oh, I slept with a girl, this, slept with this girl, dated this girl, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God, like I gave this girl who's like had such a tough time, like an opportunity to just like talk to someone. Like, I can't imagine like going through, like, you know, if you've been in war and then you've gone to a country, like been thrown there, barely speak the language. And you know, it must be so, it must have been like, I was thinking it must be so hard for her. And then it's just so, yeah, it's just so nice. Like for me, you know, I think she was like, blessed, she was telling me she was like going to Aldi and being like, excuse me, do you want to go for a walk with me? And they're like, no, I've got a girlfriend. And she's like, that's fine, I just want to make friends. And so like for me to like give her that opportunity, which probably never happens, because let's be honest, like no one approaches hot girls in the streets. It was like, it was amazing. Like, that was probably one of my favorite experiences doing this, because it was just like, I'm so glad that, you know, hopefully we're good friends. And you know, I saw her last night, and like I just want to kind of give her that opportunity to, you know, have a good time while she's here, because I know what she's going through. Well, I don't know what she's going through, but you know, so yeah, that was like one of my favorite things really from doing this.
Yeah, that's actually a beautiful story. I think that's one of the most like beautiful stories I've heard. Like people that I've worked with, like honestly, that's yeah, that's just a really heartfelt story that you're able to actually exchange those feel good emotions with somebody who's actually going through a very difficult time in their life, and something that's been facilitated by this thing that a lot of people will look down upon, be like, oh, it's all sleazy. And no, you're actually giving to the world. You're actually you're giving people reason to smile, and you're providing people with hope and opportunity. And it's nice, isn't it? To be able to do that. So we've got 5 minutes left. Do you have any closing thoughts that you want to say before we say au revoir?
Just like, I mean, in terms of like maybe what like advice for beginners or something, or
yeah, let's say, how about a guy who's listening to this? He's never done any cold approach conversations in his life. He's sat listening to this. He's shit scared. He's thinking, "Is this really for me?"
It's normal. Like it's
Which
normal.
is completely
That
normal.
was me. So for me, like, you know, first things first. I always say, like, don't lie to yourself. Like, you can lie to you can lie to me, lie to your family. Just don't lie to yourself. Like, if you really want to do this, but you're scared, that's great, because then you can work on that. But if you're like, no, I don't want to do this because I've got better things to do in my time, but deep down you're like, I'm just shit scared. Like, yeah, that's fine. So do that. You know, either get in contact with you or just set a time to do this. Like, I think everyone, don't get me wrong, I think everyone who gets into this, like, I don't want to, you know, go around cities and stuff. And don't get me wrong, you're just walking around a city having a coffee. You're literally just going for a walk. It's not like you stood on street corners, like with sunglasses, like, hey girl, like, you don't do that. It's like you just walk around with that either by yourself. Like, I like exploring cities, like you do that. So yeah, obviously I think like people kind of have the dream mentality of being like, I want to bump into my future wife at a coffee shop. But it's like, if you don't have this skill set, you're going to see that hot girl and be like, oh, I'm not going to do it. Like, you're just not going to do it because you've not done it. And that's fine. Like, I did it so many times where I'm like, oh, dream girl, no, she's gone. So you need to, in the early days, you need to set aside time. For me, like, that's what I'd say, set aside time, like 1 day a week minimally, go out and do it, you know, and just have that minimal goal of doing it. And like I said, like for me, try and disregard emotions. You're giving, like, don't think about, I think as well, people go in and be like, oh, I'm gonna get 5 numbers today. I'm like, no, that's you're focusing far too much on the reward. Go out, focus on the process. What can you do? If you're like a beginner, don't worry about doing all this like stacking like stuff, all this like terminology. If you're genuinely just beginner, literally, you know, think about what's like for me. I think I said when I first got in contact with you, like I knew how to ask for directions. I knew all this kind of jazz. But if you don't know how to do that, fair enough. Just go out, ask 5 directions, whatever. So have that, but then after that, just go up to girls and be like, look, I know it's random. I just thought you looked really nice. I just want to let you know, have a great day. yeah, you're gonna be scared like doing that. I remember the first we always talk about the girl in the red dress. Like, I remember that. I was like, oh my god, like this is overwhelming.
Yeah.
But then you realize when you're seeing conversation, it's like it's really not. So yeah, you just need to set aside time to do this. I think in the early days to me, because as well, one of the biggest surprises for me doing this is that it's come habitual. Like it's crazy where I'll be going to get my hair cut and I'll see a hot girl and I'm like, I won't be in my mindset of doing it, but I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Like I'll go do it. And like, yeah, it'll feel clunky. Like it will be like, I'll go up and I'm like, oh God, I felt quite a bit nervous there. But I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. At least I gave myself the opportunity. So yeah, do that and then just kind of go from there. Don't worry about what I need to say in conversation, how to close. Just practice that for now. And then over time, you'll build on that. Like just think at the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's very practical advice. I think if a guy's listening to this, just focus on your open, focus on those first few seconds of getting yourself into that conversation, showing yourself you can do it, and you can build on that from there. So yeah, honestly, just from me to you, we've got like a minute left, but I just wanted to say like, just well done, because it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, it's one thing to do the boot camp, it's another thing to actually take it and run with it and actually implement it into your life. And you've done that. You know, I can give you the tools, but it's up to you to go out and actually build things. So yeah, from me to you, man, just well done. And yeah, I'm excited to see where you're going to be in another 3 months and then another 3 months from there, in a year, in 2 years, how your life is going to go from strength to strength. So honestly, man, you're an inspiration to me, to the people, and I hope people who have listened to this use this as a springboard to start their own journey, to get out there and actually start living life how it should be lived. So yeah, man, thank you. I'm going to save the recording now, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Yeah, sound, dude. But yeah, cheers for that, man.
No worries, man.